December 23, 1944, 0347 hours, Cherbourg Supply Depot, France. Master Sergeant James Washington, convoy commander of the 666th Quartermaster Truck Company, stared at 50,000 Christmas care packages stacked 15 feet high across 3 warehouses. First Army forward units were surrounded at Bastogne, 450 miles away through German-controlled territory. Standard doctrine said, "Wait for aerial resupply." The weather forecast said 0 visibility for the next 72 hours. Christmas was in 48 hours. Washington had 26 GMC trucks, 0 fighter escort. The Luftwaffe was hunting American convoys. German infiltrators in stolen American uniforms were stopping vehicles at false checkpoints. The temperature was dropping to -15 degrees Fahrenheit. Every manual said this mission was impossible. First Army logistics officers said Christmas mail was a luxury the surrounded troops couldn't afford. In the next 48 hours, Washington's drivers would prove that morale wasn't a luxury. It was ammunition. They would drive through conditions that grounded every aircraft in Europe. They would lose 5 trucks to German ambush, and they would deliver 47,000 packages, 94%, to foxholes on Christmas morning. This is the story of how black truck drivers saved Christmas while saving the Battle of the Bulge. If stories of courage and ingenuity move you, please like and subscribe. Every subscription helps us honor the memories of those who served. James Washington grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, where his father loaded steel at Sloss furnaces for 16-hour shifts. James was 28 in December 1944, old enough to understand what the Army meant when they said Quartermaster Corps. It meant black soldiers could drive trucks but not tanks, could haul supplies but not command infantry, could die under German fire but couldn't eat at the same mess hall as white troops. He enlisted December 8, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor, because Birmingham steel mills were drafting anyway, and at least the Army paid regularly. They trained him at Fort Lee, Virginia, on GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, the Deuce and a Half, that became the backbone of American logistics. 6-cylinder engine, 76 horsepower, 5 forward gears. Top speed 45 miles per hour on good roads, 15 on mud. Range of 300 miles with auxiliary fuel tanks. Washington memorized every specification because breakdowns in combat zones meant death. The 666th Quartermaster Truck Company formed in June 1942 at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. All black drivers, mostly Southern, mostly between 20 and 35 years old. White officers commanded them, which was standard for segregated units. Washington made Master Sergeant by November 1943 because he could fix anything mechanical and because white officers needed someone who understood both engines and men. They shipped to England in February 1944, landed in Normandy 3 weeks after D-Day, hauling ammunition from beaches to front lines through roads the Germans had mined and artillery had cratered. The Red Ball Express officially began August 25, 1944, named for the red ball painted on trucks that had priority on all roads. Washington's company joined thousands of drivers, 75% of them black, hauling 500 tons per day across France toward Germany. By December 1944, the Red Ball had officially ended. Ports at Antwerp had opened, rail lines were rebuilding, but the 666th remained at Cherbourg because somebody had to haul the daily supplies that kept 3 million American troops fighting. Washington had driven through France for 5 months, had seen trucks burn when Luftwaffe fighters strafed convoys, had pulled friends from vehicles hit by artillery, had learned that logistics killed you just as dead as infantry combat, but without the medals or recognition. Christmas 1944 was supposed to be quiet. Eisenhower's headquarters predicted the Germans were finished. First Army was pushing into Belgium, preparing for the final assault on Germany in spring 1945. Then, December 16th happened. German panzers smashed through the Ardennes in the largest counteroffensive of the Western Front. Weather turned worse than anyone had seen. Blizzards that grounded Allied air superiority, snow that buried roads, temperatures that froze diesel fuel in tanks overnight. By December 22nd, the 101st Airborne and elements of the 10th Armored Division were surrounded at Bastogne. German forces had created a bulge 60 miles deep in Allied lines. Patton's Third Army was fighting north to relieve the pocket. And 50,000 Christmas care packages sat in Cherbourg warehouses because standard procedure said, wait for better weather, wait for air transport, wait for clearer roads. Washington understood something the brass didn't. Those surrounded troops weren't just defending Bastogne. They were defending the idea that America could win this war. And nothing defended that idea better than knowing somebody remembered them at Christmas. December 22, 1944, First Army logistics faced a crisis that no doctrine addressed. 20,000 American troops were surrounded at Bastogne with supplies running critically low. Medical supplies, ammunition, and food took priority for any aerial resupply missions when weather permitted flying, which it hadn't for 6 days. Christmas mail and care packages ranked dead last on the priority list. But morale at Bastogne was collapsing faster than supply reserves. The 101st Airborne had been rushed to the town with minimal winter equipment. Temperatures averaged 15 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chill pushing it to -20. Soldiers were fighting in summer-weight uniforms with inadequate blankets. Many had been in continuous combat since December 16th, now 6 days without relief, without hot meals, without mail from home. The psychological impact was measurable. First Army chaplains reported a 32% increase in combat fatigue cases during the first week of the Bulge. Officers noted declining discipline, increased friendly fire incidents, and what one report called catastrophic morale deterioration. Surrounded troops were beginning to believe they were expendable, that headquarters had written them off, that Christmas would come and go while they froze in foxholes waiting to die. On December 21st, Private First Class Robert Mitchell, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, wrote his last letter home. He was 22, from Newark, New Jersey. His unit held a position 3 miles east of Bastogne, where German attacks came every 4 hours. The temperature was 13 degrees. His company had lost 40% of its strength in 5 days. He had eaten 1 K ration in the past 36 hours because ammunition took priority over food in the supply drops. Mitchell's letter said, "Mom, they forgot about us. Command forgets about the guys doing the dying. I don't think I'm making it home, but I wanted you to know I tried. Tell Jenny I'm sorry about Christmas." That letter reached First Army Mail Services December 22nd because Mitchell died December 21st at 1840 hours when German artillery found his foxhole. The chaplain who processed his personal effects brought the letter to Logistics Command with a simple statement. "We're losing this battle because these men believe nobody cares whether they live or die. Mail would tell them somebody cares. Christmas packages would tell them America remembers them." First Army Logistics had no procedure for prioritizing morale over ammunition. Every manual said weapons before welfare. Every doctrine said operational necessity trumped personal comfort. But the chaplain's report included one statistic that changed the calculation. Units that received mail within the past week had 18% lower rates of combat fatigue and 31% better performance under fire. The 50,000 care packages waiting at Cherbourg represented 6 months of collection drives across America. Church groups, schools, families, all sending small reminders that someone remembered these soldiers. Each package contained the same items: chocolate bars, cigarettes, warm socks, writing paper, playing cards. Nothing operationally critical, everything psychologically essential. Standard air transport required VFR conditions, visual flight rules, which meant clouds above 3,000 feet and visibility above 3 miles. Current conditions: clouds at 500 feet, visibility below half a mile, winds gusting to 40 knots. The weather forecast predicted no improvement until December 26th at earliest. Waiting meant Christmas would pass with no packages delivered. Ground transport presented different problems. The route from Cherbourg to Bastogne covered 450 miles through territory where German forces had created chaos. The main highway through St. Vith was under German control. Alternative routes went through forests where Scorzani's commandos in American uniforms were stopping convoys and executing drivers. Fuel dumps had been captured. Communications lines were cut. A convoy would be driving blind through a battlefield with no air support and minimal intelligence. Washington studied the problem December 22nd at 1900 hours, when First Army Logistics called the 666th for assessment. The logistics colonel was direct. "Can you get 26 trucks to Bastogne in 48 hours through this weather with German infiltrators hunting American convoys?" Every regulation said no. Every safety protocol said no. Every tactical assessment said suicide mission. Washington knew the real question wasn't about regulations. It was about whether those surrounded troops deserved to know America remembered them at Christmas. December 22nd, 2100 hours, Washington gathered his senior drivers in the company warehouse. Sergeant First Class William "Heavy" Johnson from Detroit, who had driven trucks for Chrysler before the war. Staff Sergeant Marcus Cole from Houston, who could navigate by stars when compasses failed. Sergeant Thomas Lee from Atlanta, who could fix engines with wire and prayer. These men had survived 5 months of Red Ball Express runs. They understood the real question. Not could they do it, but should they try? Washington laid out the tactical problem on a map spread across a maintenance table. 450 miles, 48 hours, 0 air support. German infiltrators wearing our uniforms at false checkpoints. Weather forecast says -15 tonight, snow accumulation of 8 to 12 inches. Roads will be ice sheets by midnight. Heavy Johnson studied the map. Main highway through St. Vith is out. Germans control it. Alternative route adds 80 miles through forest roads the Krauts are ambushing. Aerial reconnaissance is grounded, Marcus Cole added. We'll be navigating blind. No fighter cover. No communication with forward units. And these packages aren't ammunition or medical supplies, Thomas Lee said quietly. Command will call it non-essential cargo. If we lose trucks, if we lose men, they'll say we died delivering mail. Washington understood the calculation every driver was making. Black soldiers received the most dangerous logistics assignments and the least recognition. The Red Ball Express had moved 500,000 tons of supplies, suffered casualty rates approaching infantry levels in some sectors, and received almost no medals or commendations. Now command was asking them to risk death for Christmas mail that white troops would receive while black drivers froze in truck cabs. But Washington had read Private Mitchell's last letter, had seen the casualty reports from Bastogne, had understood that morale was ammunition when men were choosing between fighting and surrendering. "Here's what I see," Washington said. "Those men at Bastogne are surrounded because they held the line when command ordered it. They're fighting without winter equipment because somebody decided speed mattered more than preparation. They're dying in foxholes believing nobody cares whether they survive. And we have 50,000 packages that tell them America remembers their names." He paused, letting that settle. "Standard procedure says wait for better weather, wait for safer routes, wait until someone decides Christmas packages are tactically significant. But by then, Christmas will have passed and those men will have spent the holiday believing they were forgotten. Morale will break. The line will break. The Bulge will succeed because we waited for perfect conditions. We've driven 500 miles through worse conditions than this," Washington continued. "We've navigated without air support before. We've survived German ambushes. We know how to keep trucks moving when mechanics say it's impossible. The question isn't capability, it's priority. Do we believe that morale, that dignity, that remembering someone's name at Christmas matters enough to risk everything for it?" Heavy Johnson spoke first. "My unit at Omaha Beach thought they were forgotten until mail caught up 3 days later, changed everything, turned desperation into determination. I've seen what hope does." Marcus Cole nodded. "These aren't just packages. They're proof that somebody back home knows these men exist as individuals, not as casualty statistics. That's worth dying for." Thomas Lee looked at Washington. "You're asking us to bet our lives that morale matters as much as ammunition. Every officer will say that's insane." "Every black soldier in this army already bets his life on things that matter more than safety," Washington replied. "We fight for a country that won't let us eat at lunch counters. We risk death for people who won't shake our hands. We've been told our entire lives that we're expendable, and we keep driving these trucks because we believe dignity matters more than survival." He looked at each of them. "I'm not ordering this mission. I'm asking for volunteers. If you believe that remembering someone's name at Christmas is worth driving through a blizzard past German ambushes, then we leave at midnight. If you believe morale is ammunition, then we deliver Christmas to Bastogne. If you believe that every soldier, black or white, deserves to know America remembers them, then we make this run." 26 hands went up. Every driver in the 666th volunteered. Every single one. December 23rd, 0001 hours. Departure. 26 GMC trucks lined up at Cherbourg Depot in darkness broken only by convoy lights filtered through canvas hoods. Temperature, 12 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind, 15 knots from the northeast. Visibility, quarter-mile in blowing snow. Each truck carried 1,923 packages, stacked floor to canvas roof, secured with cargo nets. Total load, 47 tons per truck, 720 pounds over recommended maximum. Washington rode lead truck with Heavy Johnson driving. Standard convoy procedure, 100 yards between vehicles, lights hooded, radio silence unless emergency. The route plan went through secondary roads to avoid German-controlled highways. First leg, 140 miles to Reims through territory held by American forces but subject to German air raids. Second leg, 160 miles to Liege through forest roads where Scorzani's commandos operated. Final leg, 150 miles to Bastogne through active combat zones. Expected arrival, December 24th, 2400 hours, Christmas Eve midnight, giving them Christmas morning for distribution. Fuel stops planned at Reims and Liege, 15-minute maximum. No overnight rest. No maintenance stops except critical failures. The plan required averaging 18 miles per hour including stops, on ice-covered roads, in blizzard conditions, through German territory. The convoy pulled out at 0005 hours into snow falling so heavily that Johnson couldn't see the road beyond 20 feet. He navigated by watching the tree line at the roadside, steering by instinct more than vision. The GMC's engine strained against the cold, oil sluggish, transmission grinding. Behind them, 25 more trucks followed in a line stretching back 500 yards into the darkness. 0347 hours, first crisis. Temperature had dropped to 7 degrees. Ice-coated windshields faster than defrosters could clear it. Johnson was scraping ice from inside the cab with his combat knife, while steering one-handed when the radio crackled. "Lead vehicle, this is Truck 9. We lost visual on Truck 8. Repeat, Truck 8 is missing from convoy." Washington grabbed the radio. "All trucks halt! All trucks halt!" The convoy stopped strung across 5 miles of ice-covered road. Washington ran back through knee-deep snow to Truck 9 where Sergeant Cole reported, "Truck 8 was behind me 30 seconds ago, then gone. No brake lights, no signal, nothing." They found Truck 8 400 yards off the road where the driver had missed a curve in zero visibility. The truck had slid sideways into a drainage ditch, cargo intact, driver unconscious with a head wound from hitting the steering wheel. Thomas Lee assessed the situation in 2 minutes. Axle broken, frame bent, truck unsalvageable. Standard procedure: leave disabled vehicles for recovery teams. But recovery teams weren't operating in these conditions. The truck contained 1,923 packages. Leaving them meant 1,923 soldiers wouldn't get Christmas. "We redistribute the load," Washington decided. "Every truck takes 75 additional packages. We're already overweight, but these engines can handle it if we keep speed below 15 miles per hour." They transferred packages in the darkness while snow buried everything. The driver of Truck 8 regained consciousness, climbed into Truck 9. 30 minutes lost. 1,923 packages saved. 25 trucks remaining. 0800 hours. The checkpoint. Visibility improved slightly with dawn, upgraded from impossible to merely terrible. The convoy had covered 87 miles in 8 hours. Average speed below 12 miles per hour. They were behind schedule but within tolerances. Then, at a crossroads 15 miles east of Reims, they encountered the checkpoint. 2 American jeeps blocked the road, 4 soldiers in American uniforms and military police armbands. The MP sergeant approached Washington's truck with correct military bearing, correct insignia, correct documentation clipboard. "Morning, Sergeant. Need to verify your convoy manifest and destination. German infiltrators been hitting supply lines all week. Command's checking everyone." Standard security protocol. Exactly what legitimate checkpoints did. Exactly what Scorzini's commandos had been trained to mimic. Washington studied the MP sergeant's uniform. Everything correct. Proper rank insignia. Proper MP armband placement. Proper clipboard procedure. But something was wrong. Washington couldn't identify what. Just instinct developed from 5 months of surviving in combat zones where details meant the difference between living and dying. "Our manifest lists emergency medical supplies for 1st Army forward units," Washington said carefully. "Standard security doctrine. Never reveal actual cargo to unknown parties." "Then you won't mind if we inspect a few trucks to verify," the MP sergeant replied. Correct procedure. Exact wording from security protocols. Washington made eye contact with Heavy Johnson. Johnson's hand moved incrementally closer to the M1 carbine mounted beside the driver's seat. Washington's own hand rested casually near his .45 service pistol. "Of course, Sergeant, but I'll need to see your authorization from 1st Army Logistics Command." Standard protocol for inspecting classified supply convoys. The MP sergeant smiled. "Absolutely. Authorization is right here in my—" His hand moved toward his jacket. Johnson's hand moved faster. The M1 carbine came up. "Don't!" The MP sergeant froze. His 3 companions reached for weapons. Behind Washington, 25 truck drivers exited cabs with M1 carbines ready. The 4 MPs found themselves facing 26 weapons aimed with the steady accuracy of men who had survived 5 months of combat logistics. "Here's what gave you away," Washington said quietly. "Real MPs would have asked for our movement orders first, convoy manifest second. You asked for manifest first." Scorzeni's commandos were trained on American supply procedures, but they don't know the difference between Quartermaster Protocol and Transportation Protocol. You're good, but not good enough. The MP sergeant's hand moved. Johnson fired. 1 round, center mass. The sergeant dropped. His 3 companions surrendered immediately, hands raised. German accents suddenly obvious when fear replaced training. They zip-tied the 3 prisoners to trees beside the road, took their weapons, their fake documents, their radio, left them for legitimate American forces to collect. Lost 20 minutes, saved the convoy. 1 enemy killed, 0 American casualties. Washington didn't report it because stopping to file reports would cost hours they couldn't afford. 14:30 hours, the fuel crisis. They reached Reims at 14:45 hours, 15 minutes behind schedule. The fuel depot had been hit by German artillery 3 hours earlier. Half the fuel stores were burning. The depot commander was direct. "I can give you enough fuel for 12 trucks. Maybe 15 if we stretch it. That's all we have until aerial resupply comes in, which won't happen in this weather." Washington faced the mathematics. 25 trucks, fuel for 12. Standard procedure. Take what you can get. Complete mission with reduced force. Report losses. But reducing force meant leaving 13 trucks and 25,000 packages behind. "Strip fuel from trucks that can't continue," Washington decided. "We'll hand-siphon every gallon we can get. 13 trucks remain here as reserve. 12 trucks continue with double loads." They spent 40 minutes siphoning fuel tank to tank, redistributing packages again, doubling loads to 4,000 packages per truck. Mechanics said the trucks couldn't handle it. Washington said they had to handle it. 13 drivers volunteered to remain behind. Heavy Johnson, Marcus Cole, Thomas Lee insisted on continuing. 12 trucks pulled out of Reims at 15:40 hours, carrying 48,000 packages on frames rated for half that weight. The suspension groaned audibly. The engine screamed in low gear, but they moved. 1940 hours, the artillery. Darkness fell at 1817 hours. Temperature dropped to 3 degrees. Visibility returned to nearly 0. The convoy was 40 miles south of Liège when German artillery found them. The first shell landed 50 yards ahead of lead truck, throwing frozen earth and shrapnel across the road. Johnson swerved right. The second shell hit where they had been. The third shell landed behind truck 3, destroying the cab, killing the driver instantly, igniting fuel tanks. Standard procedure: disperse, take cover, wait for fire to lift. But waiting meant missing Christmas. Washington grabbed the radio. All trucks full speed! Drive through it! The convoy accelerated on ice-slicked roads under artillery fire. Shells landed in sequence, ahead, behind, beside. German forward observers had them ranged but couldn't adjust fast enough in the darkness. Johnson drove 50 miles per hour on roads rated for 20, steering by instinct, praying the ice held. Truck 6 took a direct hit. The driver tried to maintain control as the cab disintegrated. The truck rolled, scattering 4,000 packages across a quarter-mile of road. Truck 7 swerved, hit ice, rolled into a ditch. 2 trucks lost. 8,000 packages lost. 2 drivers killed. The remaining 10 trucks drove through fire until the artillery stopped, whether because they outran the range or because German observers lost them in darkness. Washington never knew. They didn't stop to find out. 10 trucks continued. 40,000 packages remained. 2 men dead. 50 miles to Bastogne. 2,340 hours. The blizzard. The weather turned catastrophic at 2,315 hours. Temperature, -8 degrees. Wind, 45 knots. Snow falling so heavily Johnson couldn't see the hood of his truck. Visibility, 0. Navigation, impossible. Standard procedure, stop, wait for conditions to improve. But Christmas was 20 minutes away. Washington checked their position, 32 miles from Bastogne. They needed to average 30 miles per hour for the next 64 minutes, on ice, in 0 visibility, through terrain where American and German forces were actively fighting. We navigate by compass bearing, Washington decided. Forget roads. We drive cross-country on bearing 042 until we hit American lines. Johnson looked at him. Cross-country in this visibility means we could drive straight into German positions. Or straight into American positions that don't know we're coming and shoot us thinking we're Germans, Marcus Cole added from Truck 2. Or we stop, wait for better conditions, and deliver Christmas packages on December 26th, proving to every man at Bastogne that they really are forgotten, Washington replied. They drove cross-country, engines screaming, transmissions grinding, frames groaning under loads they were never designed to carry. Navigation by compass when visibility allowed reading the compass, by instinct when it didn't. They crossed frozen streams, climbed hills that shouldn't have been climbed, pushed through forests where trees scraped canvas and cargo nets. At 0018 hours, December 24th, 18 minutes into Christmas, they encountered American sentries. The 101st Airborne Perimeter northeast of Bastogne. Machine guns tracked them until passwords were exchanged, until someone believed that 10 trucks had just driven 450 miles through a blizzard carrying Christmas packages. December 24th, 0047 hours, 10 GMC trucks rolled into Bastogne carrying 40,000 packages. 5 trucks lost to mechanical failure, German ambush, and artillery fire. 2 drivers killed in action, 3 wounded seriously enough to require evacuation. 164 miles driven in the final 36 hours through conditions that had grounded all air operations for 9 consecutive days. Washington climbed from the cab to find his legs wouldn't hold him. Heavy Johnson caught him before he fell. 48 hours without sleep, operating on adrenaline and determination. The temperature was -12 degrees. He'd been driving so long in the cold that his feet had no feeling below the ankles. First Army chaplain met them at the perimeter, Captain Robert O'Malley, 101st Airborne Division, who had sent the report about Private Mitchell. O'Malley looked at the trucks, at the exhausted drivers, at packages stacked floor to ceiling. "You came through the Bulge in this weather. Through German lines, for Christmas packages. Not just packages, Washington replied. Names. Every one of these boxes has a soldier's name on it. Someone back home remembers their name. That matters more than people think. Distribution began immediately. Chaplains and rear echelon personnel worked through the night sorting packages by unit, by company, by individual name. By 0600 hours, December 24th, runners were carrying packages to foxholes where soldiers had spent 8 days believing they were forgotten. Private First Class Anthony Martinez, 502nd Parachute Infantry, received a package from his mother in Los Angeles containing warm socks, chocolate, and a letter dated November 15th saying she prayed for him every night. Martinez was 21 years old. He had been in continuous combat since December 16th. His feet had been frostbitten for 3 days. He had written his will the previous morning, believing this was his last Christmas. He opened the package in a foxhole 3 miles northeast of Bastogne at 0643 hours while German artillery hammered positions 400 yards away. Read the letter by filtered flashlight while snow fell and the temperature sat at -15. Put on the warm socks his mother had knitted, ate the chocolate. Then he wrote in his diary, "Mom remembered me. America remembers us." They sent trucks through a goddamn blizzard to bring us Christmas. We're going to win this war because people back home refuse to forget our names. Throughout Christmas Day, the effect rippled across Bastogne's defensive perimeter. Soldiers who had been on the edge of psychological collapse found packages with their names, found proof that someone remembered them as individuals, not as casualty statistics. Morale shifted measurably. Chaplains reported that combat fatigue cases dropped by 41% within 24 hours of package distribution. The packages contained nothing operationally critical. No ammunition, no medicine, no equipment that changed tactical capabilities. But they changed something more fundamental. They changed what soldiers believed about whether their lives mattered. Of the 50,000 packages that left Cherbourg, 47,000 reached Bastogne. 94% delivery rate through 450 miles of blizzard conditions, German-controlled territory, and active combat zones. 3,000 packages were lost when trucks were destroyed. Those 3,000 soldiers would not receive Christmas. But 47,000 would. The 2 drivers killed in action were Corporal James Mitchell and Private Raymond Washington, no relation to Master Sergeant Washington. Mitchell died when his truck took a direct artillery hit at 1952 hours, December 23rd. Washington died when his truck rolled during the German artillery barrage. Both men were 24 years old. Both died delivering packages that told other soldiers their names mattered. First Army Logistics filed standard after-action reports. Total casualties: 2 killed, 3 wounded, 5 trucks destroyed. Mission assessment: successful delivery of non-critical supplies under combat conditions. The reports never mentioned that morale was ammunition. Never calculated lives saved when soldiers chose to keep fighting instead of surrendering. Never measured the strategic impact of proving to 20,000 surrounded troops that America refused to forget their names. General Anthony McAuliffe, commanding the 101st Airborne at Bastogne, wrote one sentence in his December 25th diary. Christmas packages arrived. Morale transformed overnight. We will hold this position. 2 days later, Patton's Third Army broke through German lines and relieved Bastogne. The 101st Airborne had held against overwhelming odds for 9 days. Historians would later credit winter weather, German supply problems, and Patton's tactical brilliance for the defense. Few would mention that black truck drivers had delivered Christmas through a blizzard, proving to surrounded troops that their names still mattered to someone. The 666th Quartermaster Truck Company returned to Cherbourg December 27th with 5 trucks. They requisitioned replacement vehicles within 72 hours. By January 2, 1945, they were running standard supply missions to First Army units pushing into Germany. Nobody filed commendation requests. Nobody recommended medals. The mission was logged as routine supply delivery under standard operating procedures. But something changed in how Logistics Command understood morale. Within 2 weeks, First Army established formal procedures for prioritizing mail delivery to combat units. Wrote new doctrine stating that maintaining morale was an operational necessity equal to ammunition supply. Created dedicated mail convoys that ran regardless of tactical situation. The 666th Christmas run proved the concept before anyone formalized it. 23 other quartermaster companies, 16 of them predominantly black, began running similar morale missions through January and February 1945. Delivering mail, delivering packages, delivering proof that soldiers were remembered as individuals. The cumulative effect was measurable. Combat fatigue rates declined across First Army by 18% between January and March 1945, compared to the previous 3 months. Staff Sergeant William Johnson received battlefield promotion to Master Sergeant for his driving during the artillery barrage. He would later say, "We didn't do anything special, just drove trucks through weather that grounded planes, through Germans that wanted us dead, through commanders that said it was impossible. Same thing we'd been doing since Normandy, only this time, command noticed because it happened at Christmas." Marcus Cole trained 6 new drivers in January 1945, teaching them Washington's philosophy. Morale is ammunition. Dignity is tactical necessity. Every package you deliver tells a soldier his name matters. That's worth dying for, because that's what wins wars. His trainees spread the approach across other companies. Thomas Lee modified all 666th trucks with improved cold weather starting procedures based on lessons from the Christmas run. His modifications were copied informally by mechanics across quartermaster battalions, improving operational readiness in winter conditions by an estimated 23%. The broader strategic impact remained invisible in official records. But soldiers who received packages at Bastogne told the story, told it to replacements joining units in January, told it to families in letters home, told it to reporters who came to interview survivors after the battle. The story spread. Black truck drivers had delivered Christmas through the worst blizzard of the war, through German lines, through conditions that grounded all aircraft, because they believed that remembering someone's name mattered more than impossible weather. The story became legend not because of what it said about logistics, but because of what it said about why men fight. They fight for countries that remember their names, for families that send packages, for fellow soldiers who refuse to accept that any mission is impossible if it proves someone's life matters. By April 1945, every American soldier in Europe knew the story, knew that when command said mail was a luxury, black truck drivers said morale was ammunition, knew that when weather grounded planes, trucks drove through anyway, knew that 47,000 soldiers had received Christmas because 26 drivers decided dignity was worth dying for. The German perspective came from captured documents after the war. Wehrmacht intelligence had tracked the convoy, had reported to command that Americans were running supply missions in impossible weather through active combat zones. The assessment concluded, American logistics capability exceeds previous estimates. Enemy demonstrates willingness to accept casualties for non-tactical objectives. This suggests morale advantage we cannot match. Recommend increased focus on disrupting American supply lines, particularly in winter conditions. The Germans understood what American command failed to document. The Christmas convoy was tactical significance disguised as sentiment. It proved to German intelligence that American forces had logistical depth and psychological resilience that couldn't be broken by winter or casualties or encirclement. That assessment influenced German strategic planning through the final months of the war. Master Sergeant James Washington mustered out of the Army June 15, 1945, at Fort Dix, New Jersey, with an honorable discharge and a recommendation letter that praised his exemplary service under difficult conditions. No medals, no commendations. The recommendation letter never mentioned Bastogne, Christmas packages, or driving through a blizzard past German ambushes. He returned to Birmingham and found work loading steel at Sloss Furnaces, the same job his father had held. The Army had trained him to maintain complex mechanical systems, to command men under combat conditions, to solve logistical problems that career officers called impossible. But Birmingham in 1945 didn't hire black men for positions that required those skills. Washington married in 1947, raised 3 children, worked 42 years at the furnaces. He never spoke about the war. When his children asked, he said he drove trucks in Europe. When they pushed for details, he said it was boring logistics work that nobody wanted to hear about. His wife knew the truth because she found his discharge papers and asked why he never mentioned Bastogne. He told her, "Nobody remembers that black drivers delivered Christmas. They remember Patton relieved the siege and McAuliffe said, 'Nuts!' to German surrender demands. That's fine. We didn't do it for recognition. We did it because those men deserved to know their names mattered." Heavy Johnson moved to Detroit after the war, got hired at Chrysler based on his Army truck maintenance experience. He worked assembly lines for 30 years, never mentioning that he'd driven through German artillery fire delivering Christmas packages. When co-workers asked about his military service, he said he was in Quartermaster, changed the subject. Marcus Cole returned to Houston, opened a small garage, fixed cars until he retired in 1983. His garage wall held one photograph: 26 black men standing beside GMC trucks in Cherbourg, December 1944. Customers who asked about it received the same answer. Army Trucking Company. We move supplies in Europe. He never mentioned the 450 miles through a blizzard, the 5 trucks lost, the 2 men killed. Thomas Lee stayed in the Army, made Sergeant Major, served through Korea. He retired in 1967 after 26 years of service. His efficiency reports praised his mechanical skill and leadership. None mentioned the modifications he'd invented that improved cold weather operations across the European theater. None mentioned teaching other mechanics that innovation mattered more than following specifications. The official history of the Battle of the Bulge recorded the 101st Airborne's defense of Bastogne, Patton's relief column, McAuliffe's defiance, and the weather that grounded Allied air support. It mentioned logistics challenges in one paragraph, noted that supply lines were disrupted, stated that aerial resupply resumed after December 26th when weather improved. The 50,000 Christmas packages received 0 mention. The 666th Quartermaster Truck Company received 0 recognition. In 1984, a military historian researching black contributions to World War II found references to the Christmas convoy in 101st Airborne Unit diaries. He tracked down Washington, then 68 years old, retired from the furnaces, living in the same Birmingham neighborhood where he grew up. The historian asked why this story had been forgotten. Washington's answer: "Because it doesn't fit the narrative. Wars are won by generals and tanks and bombers, not by black truck drivers delivering mail. Command didn't want to admit that morale mattered as much as ammunition. Historians don't want to admit that segregated units fought as hard as white units for a country that treated them as second class. So, the story disappeared. That's fine. We didn't do it for history books. We did it for 47,000 men who needed to know someone remembered their names at Christmas. The historian published a paper in 1986 documenting the mission. It received minimal attention in academic circles, zero coverage in popular media. The story remained buried in footnotes and unit diaries and the memories of aging veterans who rarely spoke about the war. Washington died in 1998 at age 82. His funeral was attended by family, a few friends from the furnaces, and 3 old men who had driven trucks with him in France. They buried him in Birmingham with a standard military headstone that listed his rank and dates of service. Nothing about Bastogne. Nothing about Christmas packages. Nothing about proving that morale was ammunition. By 2020, all drivers from the 666th Quartermaster Truck Company were dead. Their story survived only in scattered records, after-action reports filed by Logistics Command, diaries written by soldiers who received packages, and a few academic papers published by historians who understood that wars are won by more than battles. But every soldier who received a package at Bastogne carried the story, told it to children and grandchildren, passed down the truth that someone remembered their name when it mattered most, that black truck drivers had driven through impossible conditions to deliver impossible gifts for what command called impossible reasons, that morale, dignity, recognition mattered more than doctrine admitted, that sometimes the most important missions are the ones that official histories forget. 26 black truck drivers volunteered for a mission that every manual said was impossible, drove 450 miles through the worst blizzard of the war, through German-controlled territory, through active combat zones, because they believed that remembering someone's name at Christmas was worth dying for. 5 trucks destroyed, 2 men killed, 3 men wounded, 47,000 packages delivered, 94% success rate under conditions that grounded every aircraft in Europe. They changed the Battle of the Bulge not through firepower, but through proof that American soldiers weren't statistics. They were individuals with names that mattered enough that people back home would send packages and other soldiers would risk everything to deliver them. Master Sergeant James Washington spent 42 years loading steel in Birmingham after the war. Never mentioned Bastogne to his children. Never sought recognition for proving that morale was ammunition. Died believing the story didn't matter because wars are won by generals, not by black truck drivers who delivered dignity through a blizzard. But every soldier who opened a package on Christmas morning 1944 at Bastogne knew different. Knew that someone had driven through hell to bring them proof that their name still mattered. That knowledge kept them fighting when surrender seemed rational. That knowledge helped win the Battle of the Bulge and, ultimately, the war. If this story moved you, if you believe that dignity matters as much as ammunition, that remembering someone's name is worth impossible effort, that unsung heroes deserve recognition, then share it. Tell it to someone who needs to hear that their name matters. Honor the men who prove that morale is ammunition by remembering their names. James Washington, William Johnson, Marcus Cole, Thomas Lee, and 22 other drivers whose names official histories forgot but whose mission changed how we understand what wins wars. Comment below. What other unsung heroes from World War II deserve recognition? What stories has history forgotten that need to be told? This account dramatizes the historical operations of quartermaster truck companies during World War II, specifically during the Battle of the Bulge logistics crisis in December 1944. While the Red Ball Express, the Battle of the Bulge, the weather conditions, and the logistics challenges are historically accurate, individual names and specific mission details represent a narrative based on typical experiences documented in unit histories and veteran accounts. The 666th Quartermaster Truck Company is a fictionalized designation representing the many all-black quartermaster companies that served with distinction during the European campaign.